people not sticking to what works best for them. I feel like with social media and with just online, like we have access to so much information. And with so much information, it becomes easy to get caught up with try this and try that, do this, don't do that. And I think that's where we kind of get lost in the maze of finding what works best for us. And I can speak to this. Like when I first started my natural hair care journey, there were things that worked great for me, but because of trends rising and new things being introduced, I would try these things and my hair would kind of take a turn for the worse in a sense.
Tonya Lane is a cosmetic chemist specializing in natural hair care, and she's the creator of Coily Chemistry, her community that has grown to hundreds of thousands of men and women. I first found her content after many of you requested to hear from her and tagged me in all of her amazing hair care content. This episode is packed with tips and tricks like how to find your wash day frequency, what a sample wash day routine looks like, how we should be addressing our scalp and hair concerns separately, and even what to do if you decide that you want to start embracing your natural wave or curl pattern. Tonya is a wealth of knowledge in this space, and she really simplifies what our hair and scalp actually need. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. I'm really excited to speak with you. I've had a lot of hair care experts, not a lot, a few hair care experts, a few cosmetic chemists on the show, and inevitably I get lots of questions in the comments of those episodes about managing curly hair. So I'm so excited. You're such an expert. I'm really excited to kind of dive in with all this content and answer some of the audience questions.
Absolutely. I'm excited.
So I like to start off every episode by asking, whether you're a skincare or hair care expert, what is your first hair care memory in your case?
Yeah, so my first hair care memory would probably be when I was about maybe 10 or 11 years old. And I say that because that was like the first time I got a relaxer during that time. And it's so funny because prior to that, I don't remember anything about my hair. I have pictures where my hair was in its natural state prior to being relaxed, and it was very thick and long. But I think just over time, I guess just the progression of just childhood, you get a relaxer, so I do remember that being my earliest childhood hair care memory, I would say. So yeah.
How do you feel about that now looking back?
Yeah, so looking back, if I can go back, I probably wouldn't have gone with the relaxer, only because I just saw how much my hair had changed. Once again, looking at past photos, like prior to me being 10 years old or 10 years old and younger, like I said, my hair was very thick and long. But then after the relaxer, I started noticing like in my pictures, like 13 and teenage years, like my hair was a lot shorter, it was thinner, it was breaking, it was trying to stay at one length. So knowing what I know now, I would probably just say, Tonya, don't get it done, don't do it. So yeah.
What are some of the biggest mistakes that you're seeing in hair care at the moment?
Oh, wow. I would say the biggest one is people not sticking to what works best for them. I feel like with social media and with just online, like we have access to so much information. And with so much information, it becomes easy to get caught up with try this and try that, do this, don't do that. And I think that's where we kind of get lost in the maze of finding what works best for us. And I can speak to this. Like when I first started my natural hair care journey, there were things that worked great for me, but because of trends rising and new things being introduced, I would try these things and my hair would kind of take like a turn for the worse in a sense. So one thing I always tell like the people in the Coily Chemistry community is do what works best for you. Like if you have a product or you discovered a technique or whatever that your hair is responding well to, stick with that. And you'll probably hear me talking about this in our conversation, but our hair is always talking to us. It's really a relationship. And I think once we start embarking into like, hey, like my hair is in a sense talking to me, it makes this hair care journey so much more easier. So yeah.
I'm smiling because it could not be it's exactly the same in skincare. Our skin is always talking to us. I always say, listen to your skin. That is the best advice I can give people. And like you, obviously it's my job to try new products. And I always joke that like I really sacrifice the state of my skin most of the time, because when my skin is happiest is when I'm using my 3 to 5 steps in the morning and 3 to 5 steps at night and not changing anything. But I can't I can't do that because my job is to test new products. But it's funny because that I wholeheartedly agree with that sentiment. Do what works for you. And often when we stray is when the issues come, right? Okay, so for somebody who is kind of new on their hair care journey, this is a common question I get. How would you recommend determining how often they should wash their hair? Because this is different for everybody. And there's never an easy answer to that. So what are some signs that you should be looking for when you're kind of trying to decide how often you should be washing?
Yeah, so I would say the best advice I would say is try different regimens, try different things. Because when you're in this early stage, you really don't have like a foundation as to what works and what doesn't work as of yet. Like that comes in time because it's a journey, you know? So the first thing I would say is be open to trying different regimens. And that could be, like washing your hair. Like for example, like for me, I wash my hair once a week. I know some women with thick curly hair, that may be too much for them. They have to wash their hair maybe like once every 2 weeks. So I would say, with so much information online, like try to find something that fits best with your lifestyle and your schedule. Some people can't wash their hair every week. Maybe they have a lot going on, but I would say be open to trying different things, but also assess like your hair, assess your scalp. Like, do you get buildup really easy? Does your hair feel weighed down really easy as well? Because then that may mean that you need to wash your hair a little bit more frequently. So I would say be open to trying new things, but also take like a mental note of your hair and what's going on with your scalp and your hair to determine what your hair needs.
Yeah, it takes a lot of trial and error. There is just not a one size fits all answer to that question. I want to do a little tangent on scalp care since we mentioned it. How do you approach scalp care? What is your position on scalp care? It's something that's really new in the hair care industry as far as what we're marketing, but our scalp has always had needs. I think we're just paying attention to it a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. So I always say that healthy hair, well, I'm sorry, scalp care is the foundation to healthy hair, so it all starts with the scalp. The best thing I would say when it comes to approaching scalp care is number one, you want to make sure that your scalp is clean. Like you want to have a clean scalp because that creates an environment of healthy growing hair. On top of that, you want to make sure that your hair is, well, not your hair, your scalp is hydrated. A scalp that is dry and itchy, can be very irritating for you, but also can sometimes disrupt your hair growth cycle. And then the other thing I would say in regards to scalp care is pH balance. If you have product buildup excessively on the scalp, that can definitely throw off the pH balance of your scalp, leading to dandruff and other scalp conditions. So knowing those things, I approach scalp care the same way I would approach hair care. I would look at, okay, what does my scalp need? My scalp needs to be cleansed. So I'm going to look for a shampoo, but not just a shampoo. I'm going to look for a hydrating shampoo. Because if you think about it, our scalp really doesn't need to be strengthened like protein like our hair does. If anything, our scalp needs that hydration. Our scalp needs that moisturization from that product. So that's number one. And once again, going back to assessing what your scalp needs, if you notice that in between your wash days that your scalp gets kind of dry and itchy, a scalp serum would be amazing to incorporate in your weekly regimen. Having a scalp serum that you can easily apply to your scalp, massaging your hair or your scalp and keep it moving. So I would just kind of approach it that way. And there's so many different nuances to scalp care. Like I said, there's shampooing, there's clarifying, there's scalp serums, there's scalp rinses, there's scalp exfoliators. So once again, it just depends on what you need, but to not overwhelm yourself, I would just keep it simple. Focus on a cleansed, hydrated scalp.
I love that. And I think that this does sound a little overwhelming, but we really have to almost think of our scalp and our hair as two different things, and how we care for them is a little bit different. And it doesn't have to be overwhelming because once you get the hang of it, it's very easy, right? But like your cleansing products and your scalp products are for your scalp health, and then your conditioners and your leave-ons, all those things are for your hair health, and they are two completely different things. So are there any maybe product tips you can give us, some specific products that you love? You mentioned a scalp serum. Are there any that you love for a dry, itchy scalp?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So I'm a huge fan of Pacifica. I think it's Pacifica, Pacifica. They have a rosemary mint scalp serum. You can find it on at Ulta, probably online, of course. But the Pacifica Rosemary Scalp Serum is super hydrating. Of course, it does have rosemary in there to help encourage hair growth. There's glycerin in there for hydration. Just a lot of great nourishing ingredients like aloe vera juice, for example. And that's just kind of my go-to scalp serum at the moment. They also have, which I just discovered, they also have a, what is it called? I think it's called Rosemary Apple Cider Scalp Tonic, and that is like a pre-poo for your scalp. So almost like a pre-shampoo for your scalp. And this is great for anyone who has like excessive product buildup on their scalp. The formula itself, they have alpha hydroxy acids in there, like lactic acid and glycolic acid. So amazing liquid exfoliants that are also hydrating for the scalp as well. So I would say those like at least right now, my top two scalp care products.
Oh, those are great. We'll leave those below. People are always happy to have like tangible products that they can look into. So, speaking of scalp, what are your thoughts on scalp massage, scalp massagers? How do you approach that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I always say that if hair growth is the goal for you, because everyone has different hair goals, but if hair growth is the goal, if healthy growing hair is the goal, I would absolutely incorporate scalp massages. I talk about this a lot. I actually highly recommend it because with that scalp massaging, you are actually stimulating that blood flow to the follicles. And I always tell people that hair growth is blood flow. Where there is a lack of blood flow to the follicles, that can lead to a lack of hair growth. But when you are consistently massaging your scalp, you're getting that blood flow flowing in a sense to your follicles to help encourage hair growth. So I highly recommend it. For someone who's like, hey, like I want to incorporate this in my regimen, like what can I do? I would say like maybe 3 or 4 times a week, before you go to bed for like 5 minutes with a good hair oil or scalp oil, that'll be completely fine. But I highly recommend scalp massages.
Okay, good to know. And what do you think about like the little silicone scalp massagers? Do you think they're necessary or we can just use our fingers?
I mean, you can absolutely use your fingers, in my opinion. I will say that I do use a silicone scalp massager for my shampoo. And I find that it does help, like, I guess because the material of the silicone, it does help to kind of break up like any type of product buildup on the scalp, dead skin cells off the scalp. So those tools can actually be very beneficial for sure.
Yeah, I actually do the same thing. So I keep one in the shower and use it when I shampoo. And then I also keep one out of the shower if I'm going to be using any scalp treatment. And that's mostly because I honestly hate getting it in my fingers. So if I just spray it right on the scalp and then use a massager, I'm like good. But is there one that you recommend?
Yeah, so, and I promise this is not sponsored at all. The Pacifica, again, they also have, it's like a pink and green silicone exfoliating scalp brush, but it's amazing.
Okay, good. We'll leave that below too. All right, so I skipped a couple questions because I went on this scalp tangent, but is there a true test to know one's hair porosity? There's a lot of talk about hair porosity, what it actually means, and we do know it's important for approaching your hair care routine, but then is it really this enigma that it's made out to be, or does it really just mean the level of damage in your hair? I'd love to hear your opinion on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in my opinion, when it comes to porosity, there is truth to it in a sense, because you always want to look at the cuticles of the hair like shingles on a roof. And depending on how tight or how open those cuticles or shingles on a roof are, will determine how well your hair receives moisture, but also how fast your hair loses moisture as well. So I want to say that it's genetics for sure in regards to if it's low porosity or normal porosity. In most cases, high porosity, which is where the cuticles are lifted. In most cases, that is brought on by chemical damage, heat damage, for example. However, I will say, as far as like a true test to answer your question, and there's so many out here, but the one that I find that kind of is like a telltale test, I would say, is when you wash your hair and you condition it and you rinse off your conditioner, see how long it takes for your hair to air dry. In most cases, if your hair dries like super fast, I mean like within the next hour in a sense, and it's like completely dry, more than likely you have high porosity hair. But if your hair takes longer to dry, like for example, I just washed my hair 2 nights ago. The next morning, my hair was still wet, so typically hair that is, takes a little bit longer to dry does tend to be low porosity hair. So those are just different telltale signs to, keep in mind. Another good one I will say too is if you have a spray bottle with water, spray like lightly mist your hair. And if you notice like the little beads of water just kind of sitting on the cuticle, more than likely you are low porosity. But if you don't really see that and the hair almost like instantly absorbs into the hair cuticle, more than likely you are high porosity.
Okay, good to know. One more question as it pertains to actual hair health before we move on to curl pattern specific questions. Which oils do you think are most beneficial for the hair, and how should they be used?
There's so many to choose from. So I'll say this. Once again, it just depends on what you're trying to do. So if you're doing like a pre-poo treatment, for example, like a pre-shampoo treatment prior to your shampoo, oils that are considered penetrating oils like coconut oil or babasu oil, palm kernel oil, for example, are great oils to pre-treat your hair prior to shampooing because they are very small molecular wise. So they can actually penetrate deep into the hair and even help to prevent moisture overload, aka hydro fatigue, for example. So if that's the goal for you, then pre-pooing oils like coconut and babasu are great options. If you're trying to like smooth the cuticle, or you're trying to promote softness, shine, or lock in moisture, then oils that are high in oleic acid like olive oil, avocado oil, sweet almond oil, even grapeseed oil are great options as well. So it just depends on what you're trying to do. Once again, personally for me, I use the penetrating oil as my pre-shampoo treatment, and I find that makes my wash day so much more easier. It also cuts down on the time for my wash day as well. But on a weekday, like in between my wash days, when I'm just locking in moisture, I will use like sweet almond oil, for example.
I think this is a really good point because, as you mentioned, there are different oils that do different things. And I always say your hair care routine doesn't have to be super extensive, but as you start kind of getting a handle, in my community, there's, a lot of people come to me with hair damage. And as you start getting a handle on those things and you start adding products here and there, it's helpful to know which category these fall in so that you can use them really in a way that optimizes your routine, right? Because you're going to have different results. This episode is brought to you by, well, me. Skinthusiast.com is your one-stop shop for all things skin, hair, and beauty. I have countless blog posts to educate you on all the skin concerns and most common skin questions I receive. We also have a complete skincare basics guide on our shop page, as well as the cutest In My Skin era crew necks. If you want to support the show, please head over to skinthusiast.com/shop, and don't forget to rate and review the show wherever you listen to podcasts. So I want to get into curl pattern a little bit. If somebody wants to start embracing their natural curl or even wave after years of maybe chemically styling it or even just straightening it at home every day, what are some tips for kind of embracing their natural hair texture?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I would say is coming in with the mindset that you are in a journey of embracing your curl pattern, especially if it's new for you. You're like, it's almost like you're kind of getting to know your true self in a way, like your natural self. So I would say look at it as an exciting journey. Like, I think starting off with a positive outlook on this natural hair care journey and curly hair journey is like step number one, because perspective is everything, even when it comes to hair care. The second thing I would say is to really nail down a good regimen. One of the resources that I offer, and it's a free resource on curlychemistry.com, is called the Natural Hair Care Regimen Builder. And basically it's like a free download ebook where I literally teach you how to build out your regimen based off of what you need on a wash day basis and also an in-between wash day basis. So having some structure and some guidance will also make this journey easier for you as well. And then also think about like, what are my hair goals? Like, what am I trying to achieve? Am I trying to just, reverse damage from coloring treatments or other chemical treatments? Or am I just, trying to grow my hair? Am I trying to get my hair to be more moisturized? So I feel like figuring out very early on what your goal is, that will also help you determine what your journey will look like. So, yeah.
Okay, that's awesome information. We'll link that little guide below so everybody can check it out. And I've seen on your content you talk a lot about the PMP method. Can you tell us a little bit about what that is?
Yeah, absolutely. So PMP stands for penetrate, moisturize, and protect. And with this whole method, the whole goal of it honestly is to promote length retention and moisture retention within your hair. Because when you have the moisture retention, the length retention will come as well. With the lack of moisture retention, here comes the breakage, which then leads to a lack of length retention because your hair is breaking off. So with that first P being penetrate, basically what that means is you are incorporating pre-poo treatments, like even the one that we just mentioned, like using penetrating oils, like coconut oil, for example. And the whole point of that is when and there's actually research proving this, when you do like a coconut oil treatment or an oil that has penetrating properties prior to you shampooing your hair, these oils penetrate the hair very, very deep. But what they do is they block out excessive moisture. So when it comes to water in our hair, it's almost like a balance that has to take place. When it goes overboard, it leads to lifting of the cuticles, aka hygrofatigue. Because if you think about it, our hair is like a sponge, you know? And as our hair absorbs water, it expands, and then once it dries, it gets back smaller. So with that constant expanding and getting smaller, expanding and getting smaller, it can tend to stress out the cuticle, leading to high porosity hair and lifted cuticles. So the whole point of that penetrating oil is to fill the cuticle with oil so that even when you are washing your hair, you kind of remove the risk of receiving hygrofatigue, that lifting of the cuticle. So that's number one. The M and the P comes in between your wash days. So pre-poo is for your wash day. M and P, which stands for moisturize and protect, that's what you're doing in between your wash day to keep up with that moisture balance and that length retention. So the M could be using a water-based moisturizer. That can be a liquid, that can be a cream-based moisturizer, which is step one. So I always say that moisturizing our hair, whether you have, natural hair, curly hair, type 4, type 3 hair, moisturizing our hair is a two-step process, and that's where that M and that P comes into play. So number one, moisturizing your hair with a cream or liquid, but of course it has to be water-based. And then that final P stands for protecting oils. So protecting oils, once again, are like olive oil, sweet almond oil, avocado oil. They don't really penetrate deep as coconut, but they do a great job at locking in moisture and creating a really beautiful protective coating around the film of the cuticle to help lock in that moisture to soften the hair and to smooth the cuticle as well. So long story short, that's what PMP is. And I found, and as well as so many other women and men too, have found that their hair is, reducing in breakage, like they're seeing less breakage, or seeing more length retention, and just overall healthier hair. So yeah.
I think there's a common misconception that conditioning agents and oils just make your hair appear healthier, which it does do. But as you mentioned, it also does protect from further damage. So there is a really essential place in your routine for those agents. So important. Okay, can you give us a little bit about co-washing, like a co-washing 101? What are the benefits, and then also what are the limitations of it?
Yeah, absolutely. So co-washing is pretty much where you are quote unquote washing your hair with a conditioner. You are getting in the shower, you're taking your favorite conditioner, and you are pretty much, running it through your hair and just conditioning your hair and rinsing it off. The benefit I will say of co-washing is that it's a great way to get moisture into your hair in between your wash days, because you're getting the benefit of the water from the shower, but you're also getting the amazing conditioning benefit and hydrating benefits from your conditioner. So it's a great way to kind of give your hair an extra TLC during the week. And I love that. The implication, I would say, which is something that I talk about very often, is when you replace your shampoo with a co-wash. And I say that because co-washes, like I said, they're great for imparting moisture to the hair, but they're not so great for cleansing the scalp. And I've come across a lot of people who just, only co-wash their hair, like they don't use a shampoo, and then they start experiencing excessive dandruff, and they're experiencing breakage, and they're experiencing lack of hair growth, just to name a few. And then I find out like they haven't been shampooing their hair. And if we look at the formula of a co-wash, it's really a conditioner. There may be a little bit of cleansing surfactants, but not enough to effectively cleanse the scalp and the hair like a traditional shampoo. So you never want to replace your core shampoo with a co-wash. Like I said, co-washes are great, but just make sure you balance it out with a traditional shampoo.
Yeah, and it all comes back to understanding what your hair specifically needs, when you can kind of understand what frequency you would incorporate that versus your shampoo days. Awesome. And can you give us, maybe for someone who's just starting out, what does a manageable curly wash day hair routine look like? An example.
Yeah. So once again, to just keep it simple, I would say you can definitely incorporate that pre-poo treatment, getting some coconut oil, which happens to be my favorite. Put that in your hair, leave it on for maybe like 15, 20 minutes. If that, feel free to detangle your hair, because the slip from the coconut oil is going to make it very easy for you to tangle your hair. And then next step would be shampoo, and then after that would be conditioner, and then leave-in, and then style. Like, that's the most manageable, simplest regimen I would recommend. So pre-poo, shampoo, conditioner, leave-in, and style. So yeah.
Okay, great. That sounds manageable to me. I'll put all that below. What is your favorite coconut oil for pre-shampoo?
Yeah, believe it or not,
Or do you just use like 100% coconut oil?
Yeah, but I would say there is one brand that I really do like, because I've tried different coconut oils, and like the quality always varies. But I will say that the coconut oil by Whole Foods, the 365 brand, for some reason it's just so creamy. It's like the best coconut oil that I've ever used, like in my life. So I tend to go for that one, but that one's amazing. So yeah.
And one of the pushbacks I get from people when I recommend using coconut oil prior to their shampoo is that coconut oil can sometimes clog the pores for some individuals. So I always like to say, always wash your face and wash your back last in the shower after you've rinsed everything out. And doesn't just go for people who are pre-shampooing, but people who, anyone, because you're using conditioners, hair masks, things like that have ingredients that could potentially clog the pores. So I know I'm going to get kickback on that when they hear that. So that's always my workaround for that, is washing your hair or washing your face and your back last after you've rinsed everything out. You can even rinse everything out and put your hair up in a little clip if you want, if you're really that worried about it. It affects everybody a little bit differently. Some people could have no issue with it at all, but if you're someone who tends to get clogged pores specifically on the back, that's just a little tip. Okay, so I want to get to some audience questions. The first one is, what should be applied to the hair prior to going to sleep at night?
So I would say once again, it depends on what's going on with your hair. So for example, if your hair, and one thing I do recommend is, before you go to bed, always do like a hair assessment. Like, see how your hair, see how your hair feels, see how your scalp feels, for example. If it feels pretty good, if it feels nice and soft, go to bed, and that's completely fine. Maybe do a scalp massage and go to bed. I always recommend using like some type of protective scarf, or going to sleep with like silk or satin pillowcases, just to protect your hair. But just do a hair assessment prior to going to bed. If you notice that, okay, your hair feels kind of dry, or like kind of dull or brittle, then I would say do the M and the P that I mentioned earlier. Add a moisturizer, add a lightweight oil on top of that. Maybe twist up your hair, like put it in some type of form, then put like your scarf on and then go to bed, but I would definitely do some level of like a nightly hair scalp assessment, once again, incorporating those scalp massages if hair growth is the goal. And I think that's going to be amazing for anyone, but that's what I would recommend.
That is such a great tip. I think so many times at night we like kind of cap our routine with like brushing our teeth and doing our skincare, because we don't maybe necessarily think that our hair needs nightly attention, and it may not, but just checking in to see what it needs. That's such a fantastic tip. I love that. Okay, next question. How can you keep curly hair looking moisturized and frizz-free? I'm assuming it's going to go back to that PMP method.
Yeah, yes, that too, for sure. But I would also say, especially when it comes to frizz, number one, I would say try to avoid excessive heat on the hair. Because heat, like I said, heat in moderation with the heat protectant is completely fine, but too much heat, of course, can lift the cuticles, lead to moisture loss, which then leads to frizzy hair. So I would say, number one, try to avoid excessive heat. Number two, I would say don't skip out on your deep conditioning treatments. Those are going to be so pivotal for your hair when it comes to the strength and the elasticity and the integrity, like all of that. And deep conditioners are amazing because a lot of times they contain different minerals and vitamins and some lightweight proteins and of course hydrators and conditioners. So you don't want to skip out on that extra TLC slash moisture for your hair because once again, lack of moisture will definitely lead to frizzy hair. And then the last thing I would say, depending on your hair, you may want to avoid humectants high up in the ingredient list, So if you have a liquid moisturizer or even a cream-based moisturizer, and let's say the second ingredient is glycerin or butylene glycol, for example, you may want to avoid that, especially on the days when you plan to, wear your hair out in curly state, because like I said, that humectant can definitely, especially being so high up in the ingredient list, that can definitely lead to some frizzy hair. So those would be like my top 3 frizz-free tips, I would say.
That's a really good tip about the humectant, and I think probably something that people don't realize because we think of humectants as hydrating and beneficial, which they are, but again, listening to your hair and understanding what it needs, it's completely different. Okay, how would you incorporate bond building and peptide treatments into a routine?
Yeah. So once again, there's no one size fits all. It really depends on what your hair needs and what your hair is currently experiencing. So for someone who may get color treatments on a regular basis, you may want to incorporate that more into your regimen. That can be, 2 times a month, a really gentle one would be like K18. There's some women who use that every week, and their hair is completely fine, nice and strong. So I would say the more you do to your hair, the more you want to incorporate those type of treatments, those bond peptide treatments into your hair, because our hair is made up of keratin. It's a very strong and powerful protein. However, depending on what we do to our hair, whether it's relaxers or, coloring treatments, once again, or even heat, for example, it does tend to make the keratin, the protein, diminish from our hair, leading to split ends, weak hair, dry hair, breakage, for example. So the more you do to your hair, I would say you want to incorporate those bond treatments more. Now, on the flip side, if you're like, well, I don't do that much to my hair, I just keep it simple, then that's fine too. You may do a bond peptide treatment maybe like once every other month or once a month, So I would just try different things to see what works best for your hair.
I always like to tell people too, especially because these bond building treatments or peptide treatments tend to get a little bit pricey, which I'm one of those people who uses K18 nearly every wash, and it's been transformative for me. But everyone has some level of hair damage, right? Just living, brushing our hair, there's some level, but the amount of damage that you have is going to correlate to whether or not you think a product like that is quote unquote worth it, right? Because you're going to see a bigger difference if you're using that regularly if you have a lot of damage. But if your hair has relatively low damage, you may not appreciate as much of a difference. So we have to kind of weigh that when we're picking these products and understanding like what fits into our budget, especially. And last question is, how should we approach protective styles? What are your tips?
Yeah. So when it comes to protective styles, I'll say this. They really are designed to protect the hair. So you want to choose a style that's really going to protect your hair. So you want to avoid tight styles, anything that's going to pull at your hair. You don't want that. I always recommend like buns are great. Glueless wigs, headband wigs are great. Braids are fine, but just make sure whoever is installing the braids that they're not like doing it super tight, which I want to say is one of the reasons why a lot of women have experienced traction alopecia, and that's a big thing, unfortunately, So I would say those styles are completely fine, but just make sure that they're not causing trauma to the scalp. They're not pulling at your scalp. And then I would also say with your protective style, try not to leave it in too long. Like sometimes I speak to people who they leave braids in for like 3 months, and not even washing their hair, and I'm like, you can't do that. It's just the effects of that alone, is just detrimental for your hair. Because once again, scalp care is the foundation to healthy hair. So you want to make sure that you, in a sense, treat your hair like your skin, like you don't want to Like, imagine not washing your body for 3 months. That's insane. Like you're gonna have like a lot of irritation. It's not gonna be a good situation at all. So, protective styles are great. They're amazing, but just make sure that number one is not causing any trauma, and then number two that you don't leave it in too long. So yeah.
Yeah, I love that we mentioned that. And I think a lot of people don't quite understand that with traction alopecia, it can become permanent hair loss if you don't stop those styles. So something, if you're noticing, to definitely take care of now before it becomes a larger issue. Okay, before we wrap up, I want to get some of your favorite product recs in a couple different categories. The first one being your favorite curly conditioner.
Favorite curly conditioner. Okay, so believe it or not, it's a brand that a lot of people don't even know about. It's a Korean brand, and it's by a company called Lador, Lador, Wonder Balm conditioner. And it's so good. They have silk amino acids within it, which is an amazing protein that helps to add in hydration to the hair, helps to strengthen the hair. But the reason why I love it so much is because the slip is amazing and it leaves your curls feeling so, so defined. So Lador Wonder Balm, I would say, is like my favorite curly conditioner right now.
Okay, awesome. I'll put that below. And favorite heat protectant?
I would say a brand called Silicone Mix Shine Polisher.
And I know we already kind of touched on oils. Any other products that you're obsessed with that you want to mention?
I would also say, oh yes, Apogee Pro Vitamin Leave-In Conditioner. That product I would say is a dual function product where of course it's a leave-in conditioner, but you can also use it as a moisturizer as well. It leaves your hair feeling almost like silk. Like it's so hair softening. It's amazing. So yeah.
And what's next? What's next for you? You're so busy. You're doing so many things. I love following you on social. Anything coming down the pipeline for your audience?
Yeah, so I'm working on a few things. Some things I can't mention as of yet, but I will say that what I can mention is that I am working on some courses, like online courses, DIY courses. I realize that a lot of people are just interested in creating things at home, just for their families, their children. So I want to use my experience as a cosmetic chemist and help them create things in their kitchen that can be very efficacious for their hair and their scalp. So that's coming up very soon. So I'm super excited about that.
That's really cool. I haven't heard of any chemist doing anything like that. I think sometimes DIY skincare is number one scary from a provider standpoint, but then also it gets a lot of hate on social media for obvious reasons. It can go wrong very easily, but if someone is interested in that, what better resource than having an actual chemist tell you what's going to be beneficial? That's really, really cool that you're doing that. And second to last question, what is your holy grail hair product?
Oh boy, holy grail hair product. Okay. Going back to that brand, Lador, that Lador Korean brand, they have something called I think it's called Wonder Oil. So it's also in that line of the Wonder Balm conditioner, but Wonder Oil. It is like a serum, like a hair serum for the skin. Well, not the skin, the hair, but it literally it feels like silk. That's the best way I can describe it. So I use it a lot if I like flat iron my hair or if I'm doing any type of styling, and I want that actual softness, and the shine is absolutely out of this world. So the Lador Wonder Oil, I would say, is like my holy grail product at the moment.
And what is your most underrated hair tip? Something that's simple that people aren't doing but should be.
Yeah, I would say keep it simple. Keep it simple. I think it gets a lot hair care journey wise when we start to do all the things. We're trying everything and have this crazy wash day routine, and that may work for some people, but I would say the most underrated tip is to just keep it simple. And that comes with, once again, having that relationship with your hair and knowing what works, what doesn't work. And once you find what works, keep it simple, do it over and over again, and you will see the results that you're looking for.
Yes, I echo that. And I lied. There's one last question. If you could tell your younger self one thing, what would it be?
I would say, just in general, I would just say, don't overthink it. Everything is going to work out the way it's supposed to. Embrace your hair. It's beautiful. And so are you.
Oh, what a great note to end on. Thank you so much, Tonya, for coming on the show. We're going to leave all of your amazing resources below where everybody can find you. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. We will link all of Tonya's favorite products below, as well as the amazing free resources that she has for her community. You can follow her at Curly Chemistry. There are so many tips that she shares daily about how to care for hair and scalp's need, as well as how to embrace your natural hair. If you have a second to rate and review the show, please do. It means so much to me. I love reading all of your reviews and picking a couple each week to send a little thank you to. And as always, I will talk to you next week, skin enthusiasts.